All right, it's telling me we're live.
It says that.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, welcome to the live stream discussion for The Grace of Kings. Everybody hold up their copy if they have it. Very nice. You all brought yours. Well, hers is cool. Fina's got the cool one, but yeah, so super excited to get to discuss this book with everybody. We got, actually, I'll let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves. I'm Ian. I'm Ian from Ian the Reader. Obviously, you're watching this on my channel, so yes, that's me. Very excited about this. And Pete, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'll do something real quick, and there we go. People are confused. Hi, I'm Pete from The Ponderings of Pete. I, like everybody here, it does fantasy, mostly fantasy, some sci-fi. I read books. I like talking about books.
Boom. Solid. Nico, go for it, Nico.
We're going all kinds of directions. Okay. Well, hi, I am Nico from Nico's Book Reviews. Yeah, mostly do fantasy as well. I'm trying to branch out a little bit, but I'm still quite fantasy. So books like this that are a little unique are nice too. So.
I guess that leaves me, right? Hi,
Yes.
I'm Fina or Josephine, whatever's easier for you. My channel is Fina Reads. And yes, also mostly fantasy sci-fi, although thriller, romance, nonfiction, everything is good for me. I love it. And as long as I can ramble about the books, then I'm good.
Heck yeah. I feel like all my friends on BookTube are like fantasy exclusive, and that's like mostly what I read, but like mystery thrillers are where it's at too. So heck yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you guys are all here, and I don't know how many, if anyone, is going to be tuning in live or going back and watching. I know we had a handful of people who were reading it with us, but we'll see. I'm just excited to get to discuss this book with you guys, though, because this was a very discussion-worthy book, I think. It was like so different than most fantasy books that I've read. I don't know about you guys, but it felt like historical fiction almost in some ways, but also like fantasy, and like, I don't know, it was crazy. It was a crazy book. So I have some questions, but before we get into those, like, what did you guys think of the book, just generally?
Best book. It was.
I'm more mid.
There you go.
Good.
I liked it. It did not blow me away by any means, and I had some complaints, but I thought it was very good overall.
Out, Nico. Out. Go.
you need me for balance.
We
Come
do,
on.
yes. You provide an alternate perspective. So, all right. What about you, Pete?
Oh, I loved it. I think one of our main characters is probably one of my most favorite characters I've ever read.
Cooney?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. He's
Okay.
amazing. Yeah. For a lot of different reasons. But like, I don't think it's like a perfect book. I don't think a perfect book exists, because that's like, I don't know, perfection is overrated, or that's an entire different philosophy video about if perfection exists in books. But I think it's a really, really good book, and surprisingly good, because, like, you know, it reads so different.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, this was his debut like novel, right? I know he'd written like short stories before, but I think this was his first full-length novel.
Yep.
I think. Yeah. I'm. It's not a 5-star for me, but it blew me away in a lot of ways. Like, there are things about it that I absolutely loved, and there are things that kind of deterred from my experience a little bit. But overall, I'm feeling pretty positive. So yeah. Awesome. Well, first off, which cover do you guys like better? Do you like the US cover or the UK cover?
I say, can I see? Oh, I always point in the wrong direction. That one closer. See, that looks like it fits this a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I get what they were going for the US, but that is like a really elegant cover.
Yeah.
Like
I will
that.
say I like the flower because it is such a huge symbol in the book, the dandelion. Is this a dandelion, though? It doesn't look like what I typically picture a dandelion as. Like,
that's
like
the actual flower versus like when it's
okay, there you go. Yeah, but I think I like the UK version. Like, I'd like to own the UK version, but as far as like simple fantasy covers go, I think this one's pretty good. Like,
outside of the sticker.
Yeah, I can't find a version of this without the sticker. It's crazy.
It's a printed sticker, right? It's not even like you can try. It's printed.
Yeah. Oh man, those are the worst. I mean, good for you, buddy, for being a Nebula finalist, but but come on.
I don't care.
Although I have to say, I mean, minimalist definitely. I like the symbolic of the dandelion growing through the helmet, especially after you read the book and you have kind of an idea of what the story is about.
Yeah.
Just looking at it, never having read it, is kind of like, yeah, you know. But afterwards, like, oh, okay, I see where you were going there.
Yeah, it definitely has. I think it has more meaning than the UK cover, but the UK cover is just like stunning.
The color combination is just what blows me away. That green, pinkish, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it, the landscape, the flying kite contraption, all of it. And especially like with the two books that follow after, like side by side, the way the art lines up, it's just.
I actually never tried that. I saw that the other day. Well, let's see. Yes, it does. Wait, hang on. Oh, God. Okay. Clumsy me. Hang on. There you go. I don't know. Can you see that?
Yeah, let me.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nope, not what I wanted to do.
Hi.
There we go. Hold them. You can hold them up again. You're bigger now.
I don't know if that's a good thing that I'm bigger, but here you go.
That's awesome.
It is so cool, especially like with the third one. It looks, and they all go that way. I haven't seen it with the fourth book yet, but the three together just look immaculate. So.
Yeah. Although I've heard someone say that the cover actually spoiled something in the book. I have no idea what it is, though.
The cover of the first book?
Yeah, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, I have no idea what it's spoiling. I've read it somewhere in one of the Discords because it was our group that was reading it, and over on Jimmy Nutt's Discord, a couple of people were reading it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where I've read it, but someone said, anyway, yeah, that I'm telling you. So the UK, I figured that out too. The UK prints 2 sizes of paperbacks. The first run is like a larger size, and then they print a second edition that is the small size. So I'm now sitting here and have to wait for book 3 and 4 for the small sizes that come in August and January. So,
but it will come at least. If it will come, then it'll be worth it. Because it bothers me so much when they just like ditch the old way of doing it and change it the other one. That's like, oh, why would you do that? But
Shadows of the Apt has 4 different cover style changes, I believe.
Oh, are you talking? Oh, is that Adrian Tchaikovsky? Yeah. The cover I have looks really cool, but almost every other cover I see is completely different. I'm like,
some covers have like 5 because they just re-released all 10 in a cohesive, whatever with the blackish covers.
Those are cool.
Those are all they're cool. I like the original covers that they have for the first 5 better. Just because they're so different and they almost look like Warhammer covers.
Yeah, I have one that's like it's like gold primarily, and it's just like a huge fight scene.
Yeah, like that's the one I'm
That's
talking
the one?
about.
Okay. Yeah, I like that cover a lot. I just found it at a used bookstore, so.
I think I have a purple one.
Speaking of spoilers though, like I was actually looking through the character list, and like it spoils. I mean, this is a spoiler discussion, so I can just go ahead and talk about it. But like, it says like Gia is Cooney's wife. It mentions like the first and second emperor, and things like that. So like, there are like minor spoilers, but I think that is kind of a testament to the fact that like Ken Liu is like playing into the long game with this series in a way. Like the little spoilers don't matter as much as like making sure you're tracking with like where the war is headed and people's motivations more than anything else. Like that matters more. So
does any of you read the glossary before you start reading the book?
Never looked at it once.
I glanced over it.
Maybe that's why you didn't like it, Nico. That's
no, I just like I don't like having to flip back, so I'll just keep reading until I figure it out. And there are times where I'm like, who is this? And then I read like another page or two, and I'm like, oh, that's you. I remember now. So I don't know. For me, it's more like annoying to have to flip back and like check. And I get some people that makes it much, much better, and I get that. But usually I'm just like, I'll figure it out eventually. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah. I like only use it when like something really important is happening with a character, and I'm like, wait, who the heck are you again? And then I'll have to clarify before the big thing happens. Because if somebody dies, like I want it to emotionally impact me a little bit. So
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there were a few times I had to use the character glossary or whatever, cast characters. Mostly because it's just like, it really depends. Like if I'm really tired, like I had to actually like not read this book at times because I knew I would have to be like really remembering who all the characters were and all that jazz. So it was really helpful. It's definitely a really different approach to having a character summary because like comparing this to Malazan, which I promise I won't do like the entire.
I'm gonna start making a list of how many times you mentioned Malazan. I have a little strike one.
But like, so with Steven Eriksson's character list, he literally puts every character. Like you will have Steve, a guard, in his character lists. Like that's, and you're like, oh, and you see him for 2 pages. This character list was actually really nice because after Kyle at Read by Kyle like told us, it was like, hi, if they're not in the character list, they're basically not important. So if I couldn't find them there, I was like, okay, they're negligible. I don't need to care about them. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things, I almost wish I knew that about which characters were important, which ones weren't going into it, because then I could kind of look at the characters that like didn't matter as much as their like page presence as serving a different kind of purpose than just like character development. Like when they appear, it serves to like add to the world or to tell you a little bit more about the tension that's rising or whatever. So yeah, it was definitely like a different approach to a story as well, just the way that those characters like played so much into it. It kind of reminds me of like, because Stephen King will do that a lot too. Like he'll have like the main characters and their story, and then all of a sudden you'll get like a chapter from some like random grocery store employee who like dies traumatically, and you're like, why did that matter? But it was used to like reveal the monster or whatever. Like it was kind of that kind of thing, but I just didn't expect it. So
yeah, that is definitely something with the book, right? Especially like I think the first half and the second half, it got a little bit better when it comes to that.
more
But
focused.
the first half, I see more like as a huge introduction into this is the world and its history, right? This is what you kind of need to know to understand where the characters are coming from and what decision or why they're making the decisions they are making. And it's, you know, you don't need to memorize any of it, but it just helps you to get kind of a bigger picture. And I agree, that's very different to usual, like how you're introduced into fantasy worlds. Like it's either very slow, you follow one character and then it grows slowly, or you have like a very, very info dumpy type book. I don't mean that in a negative sense, right? It's just like here's the world and I'll tell you a bunch of stuff. But the way he told it with here's the world and there's a bunch of stuff was very different to what I usually see in fantasy, I find.
I agree.
It was definitely, the story structure I thought was pretty unique. And the only things I could compare it to, there were parts that kind of reminded me a little bit of like Long Price Quartet with the way things were being explored. But the actual pacing reminded me of Magician by Raymond E. Feist, because that book also takes place over a lot longer time period than you think it's going to, and just kind of jumps. And so that's not super common for books to do that, to take place over that long of a time period. I've read very few things that did something like that. So I thought it was really interesting the way it built. And I did think the character work was surprisingly good with that, because it's kind of hard to develop a character, but then be like, now it's 3 years later, and I have to make sure that you know that they have developed more during that time without going back and telling you everything. So I did think that was handled very, very well in this book.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And it makes me so curious because, like, I said it in the Discord, but, like, I feel like this first book could have been, like, multiple books on its own if the author had chosen to do that. But it makes me so curious to see where the rest of the series is going to go and ultimately, like, what the payoff is going to be. You know, like, at the end of the series, like, what is the series going to end on if it doesn't end on, like, something like this, you know? Because it felt like you could stop, I guess. You could stop with book one. And I appreciate that because the story on its own is very conclusive and very like well-rounded. But I'm so curious to see what he's gonna do next that I feel like I have to pick it up. You know?
Yeah.
I'm calling the ending of the series right now. Cooney dies. He's buried, and there are dandelions on his grave, and then it fades to black as the seeds fly away.
That's beautiful. That's stunning.
It'll be written probably much
about it.
That's my prediction. That's probably wrong, but I
well, I think
poetic.
The second book, I think, follows one of his children primarily. So I know he's in it, but I don't know if he's like he's probably in it pretty heavily, but I think it follows like one of his kids a lot. I don't know. That's what I read, I think. So
I'm definitely curious about the dandelion piece. Now that you're saying that with he's going to die with the dandelions flying away, like that was so obvious that has a meaning, but either I didn't grasp it or it was not really revealed quite now what the dandelion is. I know that he compares himself with the dandelion on how it grows and loosens up whatever they were saying with loosens up the soil and helps others to grow as well with them. But I wonder what is that it, or is there more to that whole flower comparison piece that they had?
I'm definitely expecting it to be explored a lot more. Or am I allowed to say a spoiler?
Yep, of book 1, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if we were sticking
spoilers.
It's not a big one, but I kind of have to spoil to say what I was going to say. It's like, so because he compares himself to the dandelion early on, and Mata compares himself to the chrysanthemum, which is like the much more like noble flower. And so I took it as kind of like this whole first book was the difference. Like Mata was the noble chrysanthemum, and he thinks, of course, I should be in charge. I'm going to win. But Cooney is, the dandelion. It's a weed, but it pops up everywhere and it continues to spread anyway. And most people may not think it's, important or a good flower, but it is basically it's spreading and coming anyway, and you can't really stop the weeds from growing. And so I kind of took it at least partially to mean that. There were other things that were specifically mentioned in the book, but kind of the path.
Mm-hmm. It definitely popped up a lot, like the dandelion, which kind of like, speaking of Cooney, like he's such an interesting character, especially because his motivations are sometimes kind of hard to figure out, like how he ended up even like joining the rebellion. Like it wasn't really intentional. It was more like what happened, like the people he was guarding, like a bunch of them got away or something. So he's like, well, I guess I have to join them or something like that. And so he like joins the Raiders, right? And so I kind of like was asking myself, like, at what point did Cooney actually like start caring about the rebellion that was going on? Because like the first, I don't know, 10-15% of the story, he really just cares about himself for the most part. Like he's nice, like he saved that woman who's like her son was being taken away or something like that. So he's like selfless somewhat, like buried deep down, but when did he really like start caring about the cause that he was working towards?
That's an interesting question, because I don't think there's really one easy point throughout the story that you can point to, because you definitely see him change and be serious. I will say most authors, if they tried to pull that with, oh, I guess I'll be a rebel now, I would have been pissed. But because the character was so well defined and I like the character so much, I'm like, nah, that does seem like something Cooney would do in this situation. So it worked really well, even though that would usually annoy me, I feel like. But then, like, it is mentioned that once he became the Duke of Zudi, that he was like actually working like really ridiculously hard trying to make things better. But I think even then, like, he cared about the city, but did he care about the rebellion? It was kind of later. He definitely seemed, despite always wanting to do the interesting thing, he seemed reluctant to actually really want to like take more.
Mm-hmm. I think it was really Mata. Like his introduction like changed Cooney a lot. It made him kind of realize the bigger picture of what was going on, which is so heartbreaking to think about. Especially just how things turned out. I don't know. Are you guys team Cooney or team Mata?
Oh, team Cooney all the way. So I do have to point out, I promised Andrew I'd bring this up because he said it and I couldn't get it out of my head for the last half of the book. He compared Mata and Cooney to the movie Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. So I was thinking Cooney DeVito and Mata Schwarzenegger for the second half of this book.
Oh my gosh. They are very reminiscent of them, actually.
It is actually really fitting.
That's hilarious. Danny DeVito, Emperor DeVito.
sounds accurate, yeah. Yeah, definitely. You found a way for me to make like Cooney more.
Wow.
All credit to Andrew for that.
I have such a hard time. Like, I mean, I definitely love Cooney, and I guess I'm team Cooney, but like just the way it all went down, I don't know that I like. How do you guys feel about what Cooney ended up doing, like the betrayal at the very end?
I thought that was not his. It was not on brand. I don't know. It's a weird way of saying that, but I don't think that it fits to the way he was till then. So that was the moment where he betrayed himself, and he kind of knew it, and he kind of knew it's not the right thing, but he wanted to make sure that others are heard. And, like beginning of a democracy or something, I don't know, saying like, okay, I acknowledge there are other opinions too and other ways of doing it besides of mine. So let's try it the other way, even though I'm not comfortable with it. That was the one thing where it kind of went into the wrong direction. I would have loved to see that he maybe says no, and then rather gets into a fight with what was the name of his advisor? I forgot. Anyway, of his advisor, and
Kogu?
was it Kogu?
Kogu or Costco?
Costco.
One of those people.
It was the guy that used to be a clerk, right? When he was
it was Kogu. Yeah, if you're talking Cooney, Kogu or Cogsy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the whole situation between Mata and Cooney, how they weren't friends anymore, and basically started betraying each other. I mean, both did it, right, over the time of the book. Once they started, once Mata was basically pissed at him for taking the city. And I don't think it was actually them. I think it was their advisors, like the tenant guy on Mata's side and the Luan Zia guy on Cooney's side that started to, or someone else. I don't know. I'm terrible with names, but they started to kind of push their opinions and it's like, I don't think it is the way you're saying this, blah, blah, blah. And they started trusting them. And I think that's really where the issue started and where they started to, get away from their actual values and from what they actually wanted to achieve with the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, that is a clear miscommunication thing between the two, right? If they just would have sat down, just the two of them, and said, listen, I didn't mean to do this. If this is how you perceived it, I apologize, right? I as I said, I wanted to have the city together with you. We would have had a totally different ending.
It's so messy, though, like, that kind of conversation, like, just, I feel like it's something that we as, like, people living in the modern world would be like, yeah, just do that. But them being as, like, these war leaders, like, it's so complicated, and regardless of what their intention was, what Cooney did by taking the city, like, undermined Mata's power. And so it's just challenging. But, like, on top of that, like, in some ways, like, it's about Mata and Cooney, but it's kind of like the gods are using them as, like, chess pieces, and that was such an interesting way to go about the story, the way that was revealed. And just like as the story went through, I really enjoyed that aspect and the way the gods, like, played a role in the story,
Yeah. That was a very interesting thing. Yeah. I think it actually brings up the question, and Cooney actually, like, directly states this, like, in one of my favorite quotes of the book, of just like, let me find it real quick. I know I wrote it down somewhere.
Is it at the end?
Yeah, it's similar. Do you think we are words written on a page by the gods, and that there will always be rich and poor, powerful and powerless, noble and commoner? Do you think that all our dreams are doomed to forever fail? And I was like, yes, existential dread. Thank you. Great. What? This is why you're my favorite. I think that actually brings up the question of, like, how much did the gods directly provide, and how much was actually Cooney or Maddie or their advisors affecting these things instead of the gods guiding everything? Because I got the impression that for some of the things, the gods were, like, legit, like, flabbergasted that this happened, and it wasn't necessarily the gods doing everything. It was maybe one god pushing here, but a lot of the agency was more on the actual individuals than they intended.
Well, that's why it was, the whole thing with the gods was interesting, because, like, early on especially, you had times where they're all like, are you like, oh, did you do that? I'm like, no, I didn't do that. That wasn't me. And, like, so like, are the humans doing some things? But I think it was left a little bit vague. And, like, there were the obvious times where the gods, like, straight up walk up to somebody and like, hey, you should do this. But there were also the times where it's a little bit more vague. And they even say something at the end about how the humans, they're too random. You never fully know what they're going to do. But I think exploring the different kinds of characters with the different motivations had a lot to do with it too. Because, like, Mata just did whatever he thought was right, what had been instilled to him, didn't really like to listen to anybody. And then Cooney would listen to other people almost too much sometimes.
Yeah.
Hence with, like, the whole betrayal at the end, he's like, this seems super wrong. And, like, granted, it was the right thing to do for, like, if you want to, keep the whole area together, because agree, like, there would have been war eventually because Mata's too unstable. But it's like, he's like, I don't want to do this. I just made peace with my brother. And they're like, no, you got to. And he's like, fine. And he was more of the listening ones. And so you had a lot of different people react very differently. And I liked it was like Humo and Krima. something like that. Those names, the first like rebellion people who made themselves, or one of them made him king, and then they are terrible at it and end up getting killed. And it's just like, yeah, that makes sense. Not everybody's just going to come to power and stay there. So it was there was such a wide variety of characters. The book definitely did have like Shakespearean levels of dramatic irony and miscommunication. A lot, though, all throughout.
It was very like, it's the most like maybe literary fantasy that I think I've ever read. It was just so layered. You know, sometimes with fantasy books, like there's certain messages that maybe the author's trying to convey, but with this, it just feels like there's so many different things that you could take from it, whether it's like the existential stuff or like free will, whether or not that's like really something that exists or not, or whether or not we're predestined to just step into the things that are laid before us, and like the conflict and everything, just all of it is so, and I think part of that can be attributed to the fact that this is so heavily steeped in Asian culture and like so heavily inspired by that. I think that is something that really impacted the power and like just scope of the story. And some of it surprised me. Like, just to use an example, I've never read a book where like you have like the romance between Cooney and Gia, but then like she's like, you should take a second wife. And like when that happened, I was like, this is weird, you know, like, and culturally it made more sense and like it was totally cool, but like it was just something that I'd never really read that dynamic in a story before, I guess. Like, I don't know, it was just an interesting component. And I wonder how that's going to play out in the next book, because they're both, all three of them are still in the picture, Cooney, Gia, and Risana? Is that her name? I think that's her name.
Especially with that ending, right? The last part of the book where it's like, dun dun dun, how Gia reacts on what the Lady Risana, yep, how her son it was named, and what the meaning of that son's name is.
Actually, I do wonder if that's the son that is going to be like primarily the focus of the second book.
It's possible.
Kyle, you're commenting a lot. What's the story with book 2? Does it follow like Cooney's son more? I think that's what I read.
Yeah, I think in the end the series is going to follow like basically his grandfather. I think the series is going to end after Cooney dies. Not like at the very end. I think the series is going to continue after Cooney's death.
I wouldn't be surprised if he dies in book 2.
Because it's about the Dandelion dynasty. So I think that continue on past I think it's gonna continue until his line ends, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Which begs the question, how do you think Cooney will die? Do you think he'll die of like natural causes? Do you think he'll be assassinated?
I imagine it'll be he decides to do something interesting and also stupid. And I mean, I don't know.
That's a legit.
Curiosity killed the Cooney.
But at the same time, that's funny. Curiosity killed the Cooney. I feel like because he's not really Cooney anymore. He even takes on a different name as Emperor. I can't remember what his Emperor name is, but like I think the death of Mata is gonna impact him in some like huge ways, especially because like him giving the eulogy was like so emotional, and like he talks about like how he wonders whose name is going to live on, whether it'll be his or Mata's and stuff like that. I loved, like, that was probably one of my favorite moments, as tragic as it was, but like the death of Mata and seeing the way that it impacted Cooney was one of my favorite moments of the whole book. Just like, it was a great moment for the characters. So
Definitely.
Well, in general, what I liked about it, so I'm neither Team Cooney nor Team Mata. I'm Team both. I like them both for very specific reasons.
I thought you meant you like neither for a second. I'm like,
no.
I
like them both, but for very different reasons. And what I really liked about this, and to your point, Nico, from earlier, like it shows two different sides, because I don't see Mata as something bad or that he was the evil guy in that situation. He just had a very different view on what the empire should look like and how it should be ruled, because of his heritage of being the honorable person, and honor is among everything the most important part. And he even says at the end, what Cooney is doing is not honorable, right? Like the second time where Mata is in the sky on flying, where they're just shooting arrows at him and whatnot. Like all of this is Mata basically saying, hey, this is not honorable. This is not you, and you shouldn't have done that. And what I liked is that they both have those very opposing sides, but they came together at the end anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the eulogy that Cooney gave to Mata, right? Even all the differences aside, they both had their values. They both brought something to the table that was important, and they both had views that would have helped the Empire succeed in both positive and negative things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good depiction of like war, you know, because in war, whichever side is like the fighting side, like they think that their way is the right way, you know. Yeah. And it was kind of interesting, like to be in that kind of same sphere of, even like though in a lot of war instances, you know, like there's a right way and a wrong way. But with this way, you could sympathize with both sides and understand that they're both just motivated by different things and different cultural impacts that have, you know, been in their lives. And so that was a really interesting angle. And I saw somebody commented how there will be like more like female characterization that's really well done in book 2. There it is.
Hope so.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that because I loved the only female character. I like Gia. Most of the time she got on my nerves sometimes, but I loved Jin. Jin was such a good character. I thought she was so great. And it's cool because she didn't get introduced until like this after the second half of the book, I think. But
the back third, basically.
Yeah. And so I thought it was really interesting what he chose to do with her character, and how there's kind of that moment where she could have caused more division. She could have done her own thing, could have tried to seize power, but she just respected so much what Cooney had done for her that she like had that faith to stick by his side. I appreciated that, especially in the midst of like having to witness so much betrayal already. I was like, oh, yes, this is good.
Yeah. I just hope there's more equality for the female. It's like with the relationship that Cooney has 2 wives, give the women 2 husbands too if they want that too. Come on, it's not that bad.
Yeah. Well, and that was an interesting thing too. I got so mad at Cooney when he started just like going crazy with all those like prostitutes in that one part.
Yeah.
And I was so mad. And then you go to Gia and she has that relationship. And it was a weird moment because I was angry at Cooney, but then when that happened, I sympathized. I was just like, it's so complicated, the whole thing. But yeah, I'm very interested to see how female characters are more prevalent in the coming books. So
it's complicated is a good summary for the book in general, though. By the way, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's very true too. I was just gonna say that the part where he goes to all the emperor's wives and slaves and whatnot. There was even a comment later where one of the gods apparently was one of them, and it was like the one that convinced him to do it or something. And so it was kind of that thing where it's like, okay, so maybe one of them intervened, but he also definitely made that decision too. And so it didn't necessarily say oh, it wasn't his fault. It just kind of showed that was another thing they were trying to manipulate and do all that too. I did like that Gia, despite she also had a lover and everything, and she's the one who suggested after being counseled by Soto to have Cooney take a second wife. She doesn't just get there and be like, oh, this is fine. She's still I don't know how much I like this. And I know I suggested it, but I feel like it was more realistic, her reaction. She wasn't being cruel or anything, but she was definitely thinking about all her options and everything. And just, I thought that was a realistic reaction.
And their whole relationship kind of was like that, where they would have these long gaps of not seeing each other, and it wouldn't just be they get back together and they're like, everything's great. It was like, we're different now. We've changed. We've been through a lot. And I appreciated the way that was handled for sure.
Yeah. Especially
just real quick on the side piece, it was frowned upon though. Whereas men having 2 wives, totally fine.
I was frowning on it. I was frowning on it hard.
Not in the book, right? In the culture, it's okay to have multiple wives. They talked about it. But when she was Otto his name, or however you pronounce it correctly, when she was with him, it was talked about that it is frowned upon. Yeah. Not to belabor the situation. Go ahead.
I was mad at both of them anyways, and I was like, this better not be a classic miscommunication trope, and they get divorced because they were both cheating. It's annoying. And it turned out
that's the only time in the book miscommunication wasn't used. But
they were very forward with their
Yeah, and I loved that there was eventually a time of just all right, let's just sit down and talk it out. It was pushed forward by Soto. It was like, hey, you guys should talk it out, because Soto was like, I need you guys to stay together because you're a power couple, and that felt like almost an audience insert. Look,
please stay together.
I'm curious to see also what happens with Soto going forward. That was interesting that she is the aunt of Mata. Was that the relationship? That's I'm really interested too, because at the end she also said like, nah, I'm done with him, kind of, before he killed himself. But like, yeah, I'm good. You know, I don't want to deal with that side anymore. I'll stay with you guys, and basically sides in that regard. I think she kind of always was with them. But...
And I loved the specific thing that they like touched on with Gia and Kuni's relationship is that they idealized each other. Like that is never talked about in our society. That people do that in relationships. Like I had problems with that when I was younger. Like I had a whole white picket fence issues with all like, this is what I want out of a marriage. And then one of my exes was just like, chill. And I was like, you're right. This is a bad thing. This is kind of toxic. But nobody talks about it in any fiction that I've ever read. And like my heart broke during those scenes, and like just Kuni, and like that's like what started the whole like, oh my gosh, is Kuni my favorite character ever? Because like he sort of me sometimes. But like I was so happy that they talked about it and they dealt with that, and I wish we got more of that in literature today, of just talking about like, yeah, there's some unhealthy things about that are overly positive that we need to actually address in our society, and we don't.
They had a very complicated relationship. Yeah.
Do you think it is because I mean the book is heavily based not on our culture, Western culture, right, but on Asian culture? Do you think it is addressed better because of that?
I don't know enough about Asian culture to make a statement about that.
I think it's just one of those things that's not written about often. I've seen similar things in stuff here and there. It's just, yeah, I think it's just more so. It's not something you come across as much.
Yeah. I can agree with
General
that.
relationships like this, right? I mean, if you think even in the greater scheme on, you have a lot of healthy relationships and a lot of, oh my God, you're my hero type swooning relationships, right? Or some sort of thereof. Like something that feels so real seems to be rare.
Another thing that like a relationship that went away that I didn't expect was Mata's relationship with his uncle Finn. Just like how all of that ended up playing out in the end. That was something I didn't see coming. Just the way that what was her name? Princess
Kikomi. They were just talking about that in the comments.
Oh yeah, I didn't see it. But yeah, just the way that she came between them and how all of that played out was so heartbreaking, but at the same time it felt like honest. I don't know, in some way.
Well, I resent the, oh my God, she's so beautiful, I've lost my mind and can't think and will do whatever she says forever now trope. Because that part feels really lazy. And like even the part with Finn where he's like, oh my gosh, I've never really even thought about women that much. Or no, that was the accountant. That's right. I'm surprised you haven't talked about the accountant yet, Pete. But I think the accountant was like, I've learned to just not worry about it, but now I can't. And everybody just falls in love with her immediately. Like, I get it, like it's the thing, like, if you're super attractive, you'll probably get more things, but you just have everybody betraying each other. That was kind of the first time where the constant betrayals just started grating on me a little bit because everyone's betraying everyone else. So I did think the way Kikomi was used afterward, where she's like sacrificing herself to save her city, I thought was good. But that was one of my complaints. Is it just like everybody's like, hey, what if you, just like betrayed everyone? They're like, yes! Oh my gosh, I'd love to just betray everyone. And that happened so many times.
It did happen a lot. I'm curious what your other complaints are. What other complaints do you have?
So that was definitely one. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but the constant introduction of new characters followed immediately by their backstory started to grate on me a little bit. And like, I liked Jin Mizati too. I did like the character, but that happening more. And then toward the end, the war felt like it was spy versus spy, because it's like, I've come up with this genius plot. Now we're going to go back and flashback to tell you how I came up with it after it happens. And then the other side's like, I've come up with this even more ingenious plot. And it just started to get a little campy almost. And And so it's just like that part was kind of weird too. And like I said, I thought this was really good and I enjoyed it. Those were just kind of those three things. The everyone betrays everybody, no matter what, except for Jin. She's exempt, but so not related to her. But that was kind of I branched. Kikomi wasn't the super big betrayal. That was more talking about Finn and Mata, who were the only family they had, and immediately were like over her. They're just like we hate each other and want to kill each other. And so that's from the. I did not know that. That is interesting to know, but I didn't mind it at first. It just kind of kept happening, like I said. So those were like my main complaints, just things that as they happened more and more in the latter half of the book, I'm just like, this is starting to annoy me.
I think it's just something like for me, it took me a while to get used to, but once I came to because it's just a different way of storytelling, it really is. And so once I was able to get adapted to it and understand okay, this character's going to get introduced, I'll understand why they matter in a second. Then I was like, okay, I can get behind this. And I definitely do see where you're coming from with the whole, there was one instance of it where some guy apparently deserted because he'd been whipped. And so they take him in and then you find out that he was actually used to infiltrate the city or whatever. And then it goes back and actually tells you about how all that came to be and stuff. So I can understand your complaint with that, but I don't know. I enjoyed, once I got a hold of the way the story was being told, I really enjoyed it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. It read almost more like a classic or something. Like if you would have told me this was written in the 1800s, I probably would believe you. It read a lot more like classic literature or an old fable. And that was the other thing it reminded me slightly of. Is I read half of it. It was a translation of Samak the AR, which was in really old story of a Prince of Persia. Actually, what the games were kind of based on. And I read half of it, and it was not very good. But it was the style of just kind of how it was written reminded me a little bit. It was that was. I'm not saying Grace of Kings was bad like that. That one I didn't finish, but I'm kind of just that older, almost translated feel. So that was another thing. Just the style of this was wholly different from a lot of stuff I've read. And it did read, there's still the fantastical elements, but it read less like a fantasy book, more like maybe I'm reading an Asian fable of some sort, something like that, which was really, really interesting.
It was fable, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fantasy and magic elements are really light in that entire story, right? So it's really more of a, hey, here's a country, and here are all the cultures that are part of that country, and here's the entire history of that country. Yeah. The different writing style for me was what made me fall in love with this book, though, because I think if it would have been written like a lot of the other fantasy books, I don't know if the story would have hit as much as it did. Because if you look closely, the whole political intrigue and scheming, you have that in pretty much every fantasy book. But the way he told the story makes it a unique thing, I find.
Yeah. And a lot of this scheming would take 4+ books to get through. This feels like something that George R.R. Martin could just forget to finish. Really wanted to.
Yikes!
No one is mad here.
No, I don't sense any bitterness or baggage there.
No. I mean, I read them 7 years ago, and I've been waiting.
Yep.
For long.
I quit in the middle of Feast for Crows, so I'm good. I don't care if he finishes it.
I've only read book 1, and I told myself as soon as they announce the new one, then I'll commit. But until then, I'll wait. So
is it for the last one? Is it a 4-book or a 5-book series?
5 so far, right?
It's 5. It's yeah.
They're gonna be 7. Yeah.
There's gonna be 2 more.
There's gonna be 7. Yeah.
With his track record, he could easily write 4 more accidentally. But
if he ever. Sorry, I had a pen and I was clicking it and it just exploded.
Oh no!
That really startled me.
The whole live show's gone off the rails.
I know. Why did Ian just yelp like a girl? Yeah. It's here in pieces.
Sweet. I'm definitely committed to not read any more Game of Thrones until either A, he finishes the series, or B, he dies and we know there's not going to be any more, because I just don't want to have to reread this series 2 more times or whatever.
But here's the question. If he does die without publishing it, do you think they'll pull like a Wheel of Time and have like somebody else come in and finish it, or just? I know this isn't about the Grace of. I mean, it's
100%. He said he doesn't want it, but it'll happen. Whoever his estate is will let it happen because they want money.
Money.
That
I
would
see
be
Joe
so bad.
Abercrombie. I've heard that he's more like grimdark, and because Game of Thrones is like very grim, I feel like Brandon Sanderson could maybe do it, but I don't know if it's his style.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Brandon Sanderson could not do Game of Thrones. No.
He wouldn't. Yeah.
He's like, no thanks.
I feel like if there's anybody who could end it worse than Martin, it would be Abercrombie, though, so that would be fitting. I'm going to get you yelled at for having me on the show.
Probably. Yeah, somebody's about to go off in the comments. Back to Grace of Kings then. One character that I wanted us to discuss was Mira. What did you guys think of her and how she interacts with Mata? Just as a reminder, she's the character who her brother served in Mata's army and was killed, and she's basically his love interest, the only person that he love interest, but like the person he connects with. I think she really humanized him in a lot of ways, you know, because before she came into the picture, like just how he interacted with her brother, that's one way of looking at it. Like he didn't really care as much. Like, yeah, he had honor, but like he was very driven and focused, and like, I don't know, he didn't look to the sides, I guess, but I think she caused him to kind of be humanized a little bit more to me.
There were it was Ratho, and what was the other brother's name?
Daffiro, yeah.
Daffiro. Yeah. So he started, like, their splits, I feel like gave two really interesting looks. For one, yeah, that was a great device and still following them, but it gave two very different looks at the two main characters. And I think it was Daffiro who was with Mata, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was just making sure I'm right. There are a lot of names. So thanks, Kyle, the comments too. But so he started with, like, he was the person who really believed in him, but he still saw him as like this mythical figure almost. So it still didn't really humanize him much until you got to Mira. Mm-hmm. And Mira, showed him that, the world wasn't as black and white as he wanted it to be. And it wasn't quite enough, but it was that character. Dang it, Kyle. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you should have been on the live to keep us straight here with all these names.
No, I am really glad you're here.
He's our fact checker.
I had it right.
One of us will quote something and he'll be like, that's on page 327.
I feel like Kyle was like our guide through the buddy.
He was.
He was helping with a lot of things.
Kyle's actually Ken Liu in disguise.
Yeah, especially after this one.
I love it. But yeah, but so it was was so complex with how she showed his humanity, kind of made him realize what he was doing and made him, kind of want to do something different. And so it was just all of the different characters and the motivations. I thought there were some extremely complex characters, even the ones that weren't around very long. So it was I liked that character and what it did.
Yeah. And I think in regard to the brothers, I think in some ways they kind of serve as a parallel to Cooney and Mata, because in a lot of ways Cooney and Mata were like brothers, and like the two actual brothers, they were on the same side, and the only reason they ended up going separate ways is because like of an odd occurrence. Like it wasn't like they're like, oh, I'm gonna go with Mata, I'm gonna go with Cooney, and that's how they wanted it, and they were divisive. They were just with other people, and then they ended up being on the opposite sides of this conflict. But I think in some ways they represent like what Cooney and Mata should have been, like they should have been brothers. They should have been always on each other's side. And ultimately there were the casualties that came as a result. But I think that those two brothers are what Cooney and Mata could have been, Yeah. So what are you guys hoping to see in book 2, if anything? I just don't know what to expect.
No.
Do you think you're going to continue, Nico, or no?
Oh, no, definitely, yeah. Like I said, I have some complaints, and I think I have one of the lower scores out of most people. But also with everything that was set up here, I feel like some of the things that I had as complaints, I feel like were done for expediency's sake. And so, especially from hearing, pretty much everybody has said that the second book is better. I know Kyle specifically said it's better in every way. I feel like this did a lot of setup. And so the second book, maybe that'll be the book where it really blows me away. I thought this was an excellent debut. And it was just, it didn't have that something like extra to like really, really bump up. And then, like I said, my issues with it just started really getting to me toward the end because it's a pretty long book. So it's just some of those things got, but I definitely do plan to continue. I don't know if I'll continue right away. But do not read the back cover. That's a very good tip. I won't.
We appreciate it, Kyle.
I glimpsed
I told
it.
you, he's the guide of the buddy reads still. Our Sherpa up the mountain path.
Yeah.
Well,
Go
ahead.
I'd be interested to see if there was any outside influences besides like so within the world, because like there was like one or two lines where they talked about like there's pirates out there, and anytime somebody says pirates, I start getting like, ooh, pirates, what? It's just like a recent development that I realized that I really like pirates. So
Well, it looks like there's some sort of like nautical feature on the cover. Can you grab the cover of Wall of Storms?
Don't read it though.
No, just the cover. Just like it looks like a little narwhal, like yeah, that thing. And you have like ships and stuff. So
are there sky
Oh,
ships?
the Krubens. I would love to have a special on those. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, but isn't this, if you look at the cover, this is what they built at the end, right? Those are the mechanical Krubens.
Yeah, those look like
Here.
Krubens, and that's a ship. Yeah, that's actually a water ship, and then you have the airway up top.
yeah, so I'm interested to see how that goes down. I also I wonder if it's ultimately going to end up being a conflict between the humans and the gods in some ways, because the gods definitely manipulated a lot of things, and I wonder if there will come a point where whoever is in charge just gets kind of fed up with it, because the gods are such a tangible element of the story. They literally appear and they show themselves and they interact with the characters, and I wonder if that is ultimately going to be a source of conflict between the humans and the gods, rather than just the gods kind of orchestrating the humans' conflict.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the gods have their own conflicts. That's where it kind of stems from, is they're conflicting with each other. I just wonder if it's going to kind of be a more vertical situation rather than horizontal. Yeah.
I think at some point we will see that. I think not necessarily all humans versus all gods, but we're going to have specific humans versus specific gods, because the way the gods work through specific, or try to work through specific people, you take away a lot of the tools that the author has introduced for the gods to use if you do it like all the humans versus all the gods.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone of you read Trudy Canavan's The Age of 5, I think is what the series is called?
I've never even heard of it.
So that I hope it goes into that direction when it comes to humans versus gods. So that is the big topic, the Age of the 5, it's called because the 5 are the gods of that world. And I don't want to spoil anything in case you want to read it at one point. I highly recommend it. It's a great series. But there's also a very interesting dynamic between humans and the gods. And that's what I'm hoping for this series too, given the introduction with the gods, that you have that dynamic that they at one point realize, okay, we are being manipulated by them. Why? Just because they are mythical beings doesn't mean they can, just tell us how we have to live our lives. And then the whole action around that would be really interesting. But even if not, I mean, frankly, I just like the uniqueness of this book, the uniqueness of the storytelling. I really love how Ken Liu introduces those political dynamics and shows us all of these different aspects of, what everybody thinks how a world could be run. I mean, even if you look at Emperor Mapidere, is that how you pronounce it?
Mapidere.
Yeah. What he did, there was a lot of positive and negative in how he set up his empire he forced nobles to move into other countries to introduce their culture to those other countries. And then there was a lot of trade that started because of that. Let's not talk about the slavery part that he had with building his weird mausoleum and whatnot. But, what I really like is he shows positive and negative in everything that you do. And he gives you things to think about on, okay, everything you do will have a positive and a negative effect. Mm-hmm. And that's what's really interesting for both characters too, Kuni and Mata, if you think about it, right? There are positives in both and there are negatives in both. And that argument is really interesting that he continuously drives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, Pete, you said it earlier. It's not a book that you can read while you're half asleep. You have to be fully awake.
I had to
read
slow it
it.
down. I normally listen to audiobooks in like anywhere between 2 to 3 speed. But with this one, I had to go with 1.5 for sure.
And I just upped to 1.3 like 2
Okay,
days ago.
I've been
top
like
guy.
an avid audiobook listener for like 5 or 6 years, and I've slowly crept my way up to it. But now, like, if I had to listen to an audiobook on normal speed, I would be like falling asleep because it's not possible. They're like, this is audible.
Michael Kramer reads pretty slow, so 1.2 when it's Michael Kramer is about normal speed for a talk.
There you go. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's and he did such a great job with this audiobook. It almost felt like a Sanderson book sometimes because of it, though, because I'm so used to him reading Sanderson characters. Like Cooney particularly reminded me at moments of like some Sanderson characters because of the way that Michael Kramer read him. But I didn't mind it. It almost made it more approachable.
I literally I paused The Dragon Reborn, Michael Kramer, to start doing audio for Grace of Kings, which was so weird. I didn't even realize it was Michael Kramer. And so I have like Matt was Cooney. It was like the same voice. And I'm just like, what is this? But he won me over because he does so many different voices so well. So I did really like it, but 2.8.
Yeah, 2.8. Sometimes you got to go for those decimals, man. Sometimes 2.5 is a little too slow, but 3 is a little too fast.
Gosh. I don't know. I've
not for this though.
Bumped up, but the audio I thought was good. It was nice for pronouncing things, but the way he did a lot of different voices, I thought worked. Wow, I completely forgot what I was even going to say because I got distracted by the audio part. But no, that's all right.
You're good.
I'll
funny.
jump in if it comes back to me.
I've listened to so many audiobooks by Michael Kramer, but most of them are fantasy. But he narrated this book called Triptych by Karen Slaughter. It's a thriller, and it's set in just like the regular world. And it was so strange hearing Michael Kramer just like drop F-bombs. I was like, wait a second, you're supposed to be saying storming. What are you doing? What? So it was shocking. But yeah, the audio is good. I recommend it if you want to continue on in the series, especially because they do get longer. But slower. Yeah, it was a 1.5 for me. I take it back. It was a 1.5 at the beginning, and then by the end, I was able to get to a 2. But that was it. So it took me a little bit longer than normal because of that. But did you remember what you were going to say? What is it?
I saw Kyle's comment. Well, I was going to say with the Mapidere and his whole empire, I did really love the look too, and it was talked about a lot with how history is going to remember people. And he was obviously like a terrible dude and like caused suffering for a lot of people, but also like unified the thing, wanted to make transportation happen. You know, had a lot of infrastructure that was very successful, and had order and peace. And so it's interesting looking at those things. And whenever though they discussed like the good he's done, I couldn't help but think of the scene from Monty Python's The Life of Brian, where they're all complaining about the Romans. Like, what have the Romans ever done for us? And like, well, they built the roads and the aqueduct, and they just keep like listing things like, well, what have they done for us lately? And it's one that like thinking like, oh, we're oppressed and it's terrible, but it's also like, oh, there's a lot of infrastructure too. And so it is interesting, when you look back historically, there's a lot of people who are looked at as like these, huge figures and leaders and generals and warriors. And yeah, a lot of them, if you dig into, were terrible people, but they accomplished great things. And there was even, I think, somewhere in here, a note about how it's harder for a great man to be good or something like that. Mm-hmm. There was something to that effect in there. And just the distinction between a great man and a good man, was another thing I loved with how it was discussed here.
Which poses the question, is Kunigaru a good man or a great man? Especially after what he did at the end.
Especially after the end, I would say he is a great man, and he's walking away slowly from being a good one.
I'm very curious to see where his character is at when this second book picks up. Is he still going to be a good leader? I mean, he's going to be a good leader, but is he going to be a good person, or is he going to be more like Mapidere than he wishes he was? Especially because Mata represented like the idea of honor a lot, and so if what he did caused the death of honor, where do we go? What happens? So
yeah, I'm so torn. on a lot of things, and hearing you guys theorize about the next book too has me really interested because I could see so many things. But I feel like for me, it was for the most part, to the end at least, Mata was too great to be good, and Cooney was too good to be great. Is kind of how I looked at it, which is why the whole him actually agreeing to the betrayal of the peace is so surprising. I feel like because that's Cooney wouldn't do that. It feels wrong, but he does the thing that his advisors are telling him to do. And tries to, he takes that first step toward maybe he'll be a great man, but he is stepping away from good, like you said, Pete. So I can see that, but that's just the differences between the two of them and how they did everything throughout.
Yeah,
I'm very fascinated to see where this goes.
It's also interesting because it felt like they were walking in opposite directions. Because if you look into if you look at his interactions with Mira, it felt like Mata was walking away from being a great man towards a good one. Slowly, but too slowly.
And it sucks because they balanced each other out so much. Like, that's why when they were together, things were the best that they could have been. Mm-hmm. But then when that divide happened, the balance was shifted, and it just made it so much darker than it could have been. They lost the idea that they had at the center that was driving both of them together when they didn't have each other. So
I mean, the best chapter really was when they conquered, is the city called Zudi, I think, or Zudi, one of those, right? Zudi. After the whole situation where Mata was on the kite, right? And I'm challenging Namen, or again, however that's pronounced, please correct me.
But you're good.
Awesome. I'm challenging Namen to a duel, blah, blah, blah. And after they won the city, and they basically said, we are brothers. We want to rule the world together, right? We can do that together.
I'm sorry, I just saw that pop in. It just made me laugh.
Yes.
That here. Yep. Thank you for giving it a name. Awesome. But that was for me where I was sitting in the Discord and I was celebrating. I read the book. I was like, yes, this is awesome. I love this chapter so much because I was just celebrating with them on that victory. And in my head, I already went ahead and was like, this is how they're ruling together, and this is going to be awesome, like 2 emperors at the same time. We haven't seen this before. And then a couple of chapters later, the betrayal happened. And I was like, I was so heartbroken by this.
Was it sustainable? Like, that's the question. Was it sustainable to have 2 leaders of equal power, or ultimately did there have to be somebody who was the end all be all? Like, and so, man, I just don't. And that's what makes me so excited that this is just the first book. Right? Like, the fact that there's so much left to be explored with the ideas that are presented here, and we don't know how everything is going to change and play out as the dynasty continues. Like, I'm so excited just to see where things go from here. And it blows my mind also because, like, this book is pretty long, but like the fact that the 3rd and 4th books were originally 1 volume, and that they were split up and had to be published like separately because it would have been like 1,800, 1,900 pages. Like, what the heck is he gonna do in the book? Like, how much time is gonna pass? What's gonna happen with the characters? I mean, this is a very ambitious series, but he handles it very nicely. So
it's exciting.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that's why, despite like I had some issues with this one, but with everything it's set up, I definitely. I feel like it's gotten my expectations for what's to come very high. Because this, I had some problems, but it did a lot to set up, and I think most of it was very intentional to get it to where it's going. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm still very excited to see where this series goes. I think it may end up being something that does blow my mind and just amaze me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
awesome.
2 questions that have been in the chat that I would like to get to.
Yes.
One is Kyle's. How similar do you guys think it was to A Song of Ice and Fire?
Thankfully, not at all.
Agreed. I couldn't have said it better.
I think he took something that could have been very much similar to it, because I think in a different hands, the setup of like vying for power, different people, political motivations, things like that, it could have been really similar. But I think that it really wasn't. Like, I don't know. I mean, the scope was in some ways because you have so many different people with so many different motivations and things like that. But ultimately, I think the themes were so different that it just ultimately changed the outcome of it. Hi, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, that's I think we talked about it earlier, like the writing style made this book unique. The regular stuff of political intrigue and going against someone's back and whatnot, that's typical fantasy stuff, really. And that's very typical for George R.R. Martin, who, while he created an amazing big world and created something that is very accessible for a lot of readers, even if they are not fantasy fans, that was not Ken Liu's premise, I don't think, right? He really created something, the combination of something that is rather typical in the fantasy world with the writing style, with the way he went through the plot, made it just so much better. And it's not as accessible anymore because of that, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you have something different. So you get, some variation in your fantasy reading every now and then.
I think if somebody was to tell you the summary of this book, they might be like, oh, it kind of sounds like Game of Thrones. But then you actually read it and you're like, this is not at all like Game of Thrones, which somebody said, like, that's why, I think it was Kyle who said that's probably why the Goodreads ratings are so low, is because I think people enter into this book with certain expectations of what a fantasy book is, what a political fantasy book is. And this book just very much like says, no, that's not how we're doing things here. We're going to do it this way instead. And it's really great and it's very well executed, but it's just different than I think a lot of readers are used to. And so it throws them off. It's so funny. Kyle says, Ken's wife told me he doesn't like the comparison. Ken's wife? How do you know Ken's wife? What is this?
More evidence that Kyle might be Ken.
I was about to say, it's just starting to seem more likely.
I need a documentary detailing the uncovering of how Kyle's actually Ken.
Exactly. Yeah, this will be
their names both start with K.
Continuing episodes you'll see throughout the live shows. Come tune back in for more.
And then, like, at the very last one, Kyle will finally be in a live show, and he'll grab his face and he'll lift it up, and it'll be Ken Liu.
Author interview.
Yes.
Is there a picture on the US version of Ken Liu? I don't even know what he looks like.
No, I don't think. Not of the paperback, at least. I don't know if anybody has the hardback, but
so it could be Kyle, even without.
I was gonna say, there we go. That's why there's no picture.
Never seen Kyle and Ken.
Pseudonym. I haven't.
Yeah, I do think the Game of Thrones comparisons are the bane of probably a lot of books and authors because they get thrown around so much. I did immediately have to look to see if GRM put like Asian political fantasy as it ought to be written on this or something like every other blurb. But yeah, no, there's so many books where it's like Game of Thrones, but and then people read it and they're like, this isn't Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I just hate the whole comparison game,
Yeah.
Well, and it's because there are so many people who aren't fantasy readers, they're Game of Thrones readers because they watched the TV show, and that's why the series doesn't even get called A Song of Ice and Fire anymore. It's the Game of Thrones series because that's what people went for, and then they try to read something else. They're like, oh, this isn't exactly the same. I don't like it.
Right.
It happens.
By the way, Charmaine gave us the answer on how Kyle knows Ken Liu and his wife.
Oh.
Wait, where?
Well, and Kyle gave us the answer too, right above that.
All right. What other questions did we have in the chat?
This one from Charmaine. What did you guys think about the engineering instead of magic?
So cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting until I had a whole chapter explaining how to build a mechanical grouping. That was a little much.
Wait, there was a chapter where they like geeked out on math completely. Which chapter was it? I have my notes.
Great. Oh my gosh. I love
Oh
that.
yeah.
I
Reading
like
the future.
Of course you did, Pete.
Well, there was this whole prediction thing, and unfortunately I don't have the exact thing in my notes anymore, but I put down reading the future based on math. How geeky, and I loved it. But there was something where they predicted the future, and I forgot what it was and who it was. But I love that part.
It was the guy from Han. It was Leon Q or something.
Yeah.
He was the son of the greatest predictor of maths ever.
Yes.
That was his introduction chapter because we had to get his whole backstory about math.
Yeah.
See, like
It
it
paid
was
off.
a good chapter, but it's once again like this. Those are the things that I'm like we're in the middle of a war, and all of a sudden we're going to talk about math to explain why this guy likes engineering things. And I'm like, what is happening?
That's
what
why
is happening.
That was one of the moments where I didn't mind that it was on audiobook because I was like, this is cool. I don't have to pay attention that hard though. I get it, So like if I was reading it, I'd be like, wait, I didn't understand what was going on, but it just keeps going in the audiobooks. I'm like, I get it. I get it. Sure.
It gives you a break though, right? Because war is very exhausting to follow, and it's very, you're like, oh my god, I need to read, I need to know it continues. It gives you like a little break, and like, okay, I can appreciate that.
And that's actually a really good point, because at the very end of the book, the war was still exhausting.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I think he did a very good job with balancing the whole like being interested, but also this is getting exhausting that they've been at war for this long. And I think the little breaks with the backstories like belayed that for a hot minute until you needed that feeling at the very end when Mati and Kuni were at their showdown. And it's just like, I felt like I could feel the fact that they were both just exhausted with everything.
Just ready for it to be over.
Yeah.
And I like the way that like he really touches on the important moments, but like at the end when we're approaching like the treaty, they skip a bunch of time. They're like, the war continued on because like everything important that needed to happen before happened, and then it's just like war. Everyone's tired. Okay, now we're at the treaty point.
Yeah.
But one point of the battles that I really appreciated was the moment where they're like coming aboard the land or whatever, and they decide to burn the ships because it's basically like, all right, you got to fight for your life now. We burned all of our food and everything, so the only stuff you're going to get is what you take off of somebody else. And that was just such a bold move that I appreciated so much. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I mean, it's dark and it's intense, but I loved it.
Yeah. But the engineering, just to go, besides, no, Mata is not the meanie poo-poo head. I don't think so.
He's a misunderstood meanie poo-poo.
Yeah, he's got a soft heart.
I think I brought something great to the story. Anyway, so engineering in general, I'm sorry that I got off track there with the math part, but like the way they described how they made the shit, I forgot the name. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse on your channel.
Okay.
The whales, the narwhals, how they made those to go underwater and pass by, and the whole explanation on why they cannot be underwater for so long and that they have to be above those volcanoes that are under. I loved all of this. This was so amazing. And I didn't think it was too, I mean, I love techie stuff. So that's probably, you know, if you don't like techie stuff, you probably don't appreciate that stuff as much as I did. But I love the explanation and all the detail and the background on why this is working now and why we can do it this way. And yeah, I loved it. And I saw somewhere someone saying, Kyle, I think you said there's more of that, or Charmaine. I don't know.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I wonder how the technology is going to progress as time passes. Because, like, that's one of the things that I like about, like, what Brandon Sanderson did in, like, Mistborn, where, like, you've got the first trilogy, but then time passes and then they have new technology. Of course, that's a little bit more, like, modern technology. I like that this focuses more on, like, where these things are progressing rather than just, like, we have cell phones now or something like that. You know, obviously
it's more steampunkish, right? It's like it has more with the airships.
Silkpunk.
What?
Silkpunk.
Silkpunk? That is a thing. Okay.
I think
you just read it.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know about it until we read it. So.
Essentially,
Now I'm picturing the last book being this, but through a cell phone.
Heck yeah.
It'll be like a Nokia.
That's
the only
power.
thing that could stop it.
Right.
Dandelion.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Charmaine's point on the Shark Tank pitch stuff. Yes, this was great. And how he rattled through those things, right? And you thought like, okay, it's just one of those chapters again where he just lists all this crap. And then all of this is used later on. I thought that was so brilliantly done. Yeah.
I am dying picturing it being Shark Tank now. That is such a great visual. I'm just saying Cooney's like, I'm out. No. And
Ken did invent the term.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no. I have this book, and this book isn't the only one scratching this itch of mine, because I have Shadows of the Apt, like minor spoiler. They're discovering air power basically. So them actually exploring like, hi, so air power is a thing. And like, so minor backstory for me is like I was in something called the Civil Air Patrol, which is like Air Force light sort of thing. Like it's an auxiliary for kids to do, and I learned a lot through there. It's really interesting about leadership and about air power. So I have random knowledge about this stuff, and seeing that pop up in a book, I'm like, I know about this thing, and you're exploring it in a fantasy book. This is great.
I just appreciate the
engineer. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Ken Liu is an engineer, right?
Kyle.
let's go to the experts. Hold on. I just appreciate that he did things with the technology and with like the things that he incorporated into his plots that a lot of authors aren't doing. I like that it was fantasy without relying so heavily on magic. As much as I love a good magic system, this was refreshing. What did he say?
Andrew's just like, no, he's a
True. Man,
he's
that
one
is
of the most lauded authors in the field.
Andrew. Okay, I'm leaving now. Sorry, now I show myself out.
I didn't realize he was the guy who translated the three-body problem.
Yeah, he has an introduction in there I saw, and I think he does at least. But yeah, he's does a lot apparently. A lawyer and an engineer and an author. I mean, role model right there.
I really hope he didn't write his own about the author, or he is the most conceited dude ever. But
I never read this stuff about the author. I never read this in books.
I usually do. I actually didn't read this one because I finished it on audio.
I don't even.
He's one of the most lauded authors in the field of American literature.
I really hope he didn't write it either.
Surely not.
Did Ken write his own about the author?
I don't even have that in here. Well, now I have to get the US version. Great. Just so I can.
No, I'm going to help you out. You don't have to. It's not worth it.
Just as an explanation, before we went live, we had a whole conversation around that we need both versions plus the broken binding version and whatnot. We need to buy them all.
We need that's the baseline.
To buy the US edition just for the author bio. Even I'm like, I don't know, man. That might be a little too far.
Steps away from saying that you like stickers on covers.
No.
Yeah, I gotta get the edition with the sticker.
No.
Just have them all. Do you think this could ever be a
broken binding stuff, though?
That kind of reminds me, actually. Do you guys feel like this series could ever be adapted? And if so, in what format?
A movie would make sense.
Yeah.
They'd leave too much out. Like it feels like there's a lot that could be cut. Speaking of. But
I feel like this is one of the prime examples of something that should not be adapted because it just wouldn't be the same.
I can agree.
That was more because I always think about that as I'm reading through something. I'm like, would this be adaptable? And you could do it, but I don't think it would be getting good. Or if they just used like this as a very basic inspiration to try and do something, but the amount of time that passes, the amount of detail, it's just like you would have to lose most of what makes this such an interesting book in order to adapt it.
You'd have to add too much if you wanted to be even slightly faithful.
Either that or like the first book alone would have to take like 4 seasons.
True.
Or you would have to do it MacGyver style, where you have the engineering scenes with that dramatic 80s music behind it, right?
Yes. We knew this was Asian influence, but we didn't see the 80s influence coming in. Andrew, to answer your question, I think personally that if the gods had been left out, I think it would have changed the story too much. I think that they added something to the tone and to the overall scope of the story that's essential, just because like we talked about this a little bit earlier, but how you have the question of like, are the characters themselves really responsible for the things they're doing, or is it the gods' influence on them? It just brings that into question. And the flip side of that, like, can they blame the gods for their involvement, or is it really just, no, Cooney chose to do what he did, So it just adds a lot more complexity to the story in a way that I think was really great. And I also feel like I can't necessarily comment on whether or not they should or could be in the story or like could have been removed without seeing the full scope of where they're headed. Like I want to see how the gods interact with the characters in book 2 and 3 and 4 before I say like, nah, no way.
Well said.
Yep.
I think in this book that I think you briefly touched on this with just like the gods provided the scope. I think if you took the gods out of this book, that there would be a lot of readers that would be lost because the gods gave the book a point with like, hi, everybody's vying for the like you kind of knew that everybody was vying for the throne, but like that's half of the fantasies out there nowadays. So it's kind of like, what's the end point for this book? and the gods provide context of it's going to be, this book is going to be the last one left standing, versus saying, oh, this book is going to end before we get there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and all the main characters, or the ones that led to a crucial decision being made, were compared to the gods. So there was a really interesting dynamic between, he is like this and this god. Like Mata is like the I have a glossary here.
I don't know any of the gods' names, man. I lost those. Like they pop up and be like, yeah, you're that one. Cool. There is a specific section for the gods in the glossary, though.
Yeah.
Leo?
Yeah, that guy. So, I mean, anyway, all of them had a comparison to it, and it added, first of all, it added to the story itself, right? It gave it more depth because of that, because they had a religion and they had a certain belief in all of those things, and they saw something in those people that made them, because of that made them bigger, right? If you see a god in someone, it grows in your mindset, that person grows and the value of that person grows. So I think they did that pretty interestingly.
I agree.
The turtle. Yep. Do we know what those gods look like? Maybe one of them is a turtle. We don't know yet.
One of them has the pawi of the turtle.
See?
They seem to sometimes be animals, sometimes human. I think they can kind of be whatever they want.
Yeah, they have shape-shifting stuff.
Yeah. Hey, Lana.
Lana.
That's the real question. Is like, was
yeah,
it important because a god chose him, or because he decided to be? This comment is really interesting and kind of sparked something. What if we had a series that was basically as Grace of Kings, but as a series of vignettes of like where you have like you follow one character an episode, and maybe during the last few episodes of the season you start switching between Mati and Kuni, but for the most part you're just, each episode is one different character to give you a sense of the world. Do you think that would work as a TV series?
I don't know that I would enjoy it, but I don't know necessarily that it would engage audiences enough, because you would have a hard time keeping track of like the trajectory. I think, you'd see the world, but I think the plot would lose something. And that I don't necessarily know that I'd go so far as to say that I don't think this could be adapted. I think it is a book that is at very high risk of being adapted poorly. Yes. If it was ever adapted. Just because I think it really, Ken Liu would have to be involved with it for me to get behind it. Otherwise, it would be any other show. They'd probably cut out the gods entirely. They would probably just turn it into because on paper, this book can be compared to a lot of things. That's why it gets the Game of Thrones comparison. But I think in execution, it has to have all of those other elements. Otherwise, it's not the same.
Although, if you do it, what's the Star Wars show called? Mandalorian, in the Mandalorian style? That's when you follow one character. I mean, you still have the big lore kind of wrapped around it, and it has a bigger purpose, right? Because you get more background knowledge for the Mandalorian. I don't know.
I'd have to consult someone who's only seen the Mandalorian and not any other Star Wars.
Yeah, that would feel.
I mean, I've seen Star Wars and I thought the Mandalorian was boring. Never finished it. But
ouch!
I don't
really.
I did.
Ouch,
I will admit I didn't finish it, but I did not get the hype at all. I'm like, he just sort of walks around and says, "This is the way." Occasionally, I mean,
he has time to be a booktuber too.
Look, Ken is actually. He has somehow found out how to clone himself, and so he can do everything all at once.
Oh, dang. He beat Brandon Sanderson to it. Dang.
No, he probably helped Brandon. Actually, maybe Brandon Sanderson figured it out, and he helped out Ken. Who knows?
Yeah,
There's cloning involved here somewhere. I don't know where, but it's here.
Maybe they found it out together, and they're now, only now is it really coming out, because he's been like, whatever. And then Tchaikovsky had to be in on it, too. He's got the eyebrows for it and has the crazy output for it as well.
I still haven't read any Tchaikovsky, and it's probably the bane of my existence.
He's good. He has a lot of variety, so there's a lot of different places to jump in for him.
That's what I hear, and I will one day.
And try different books from him, because there are books that you will like and books you won't like as much. So he's very different, huge variety on how he writes things.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So I'm excited to try him later this year. But Any other questions? Anything else y'all wanted to talk on? Any other things that stood out to you with this first book?
I think I've gotten all of my good and bad things out.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the comments right now. Sorry.
No, you're good. Wait, really? It's cloning conspiracy. You heard it here first, folks. Heck yeah. Confirmed. Cloning exists.
I'm surprised. Well, actually, you watched them first on Greg's channel, I'm pretty sure, didn't you? Nico is a dark friend.
I guess, what are y'all's... Oh, wait, want everyone's wildest predictions for book 2? All right, so they're going to find out how to resurrect people from the dead. Mata's going to come back, and he's going to start the first... He's going to be the founder of McDonald's. He's going to bring McDonald's to the dynasty. Yes.
No, don't destroy that good food in there.
Just kidding. I bet Cooney dies in book 2 for sure. And maybe Gia takes over somehow or something. She gets... Not Gia. Ooh. Or maybe Gia and the other wife are going to throw hands at each other. I can see that.
There's so many ways this can go.
I think
I agree with everything except it's going to be Burger King.
Burger King.
Royal. So you were close.
I was very close. Got to get that Whopper. It's gonna be great. What are y'all? What's y'all's star rating?
I don't want to get yelled at again.
I don't have a star rating.
Is that 4.5 or 4, Fina?
4. I don't do half stars. That is also blasphemy.
What?
I did 3.5, which is rounded to a 4 on Goodreads.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
I'm going 4.
Going back to Wildest predictions, I think we're going to get lots of pirates. I think we're literally, Wall of Storms, hear me out. We're going to have pirates on ships literally riding a storm. Like, we're going to have, like...
Riding a wall of storms.
Yeah, riding a wall of storms. Like, they're surfing, but ships are surfing. Like, that would be, so good. Yeah. So great. Lots of pirates. Cooney becomes a pirate lord, maybe. Or maybe his son becomes a pirate lord. Ooh.
I also hope that her name again, the one that led the army on Cooney's side, that she plays a bigger role. Yeah, that there's something going to happen with her, because she has the tendencies on destroying what she built herself, and I hope that something in that direction happens.
Well, she almost seems like a character that should have been introduced in book 2 because of the fact that she came in so late in the game. But I think Ken Liu was very purposeful in making sure that we know who she is going into book 2. Yeah. So I think that she's going to have a really big role to play.
What if Jin becomes a pirate lord? That would.
I'm down.
Like, Jin, you're antsy, and I need you to go do something. Here, go take out these pirates and explore the rest of the world.
I think he just really likes pirates.
She took over the airships. Yeah, she took over the airships. So she is an air pirate then, not on sea, but in the air.
Roughly.
Very excited for Jin being more at the center, because she was a character that I was shocked to love so much. So,
better prediction. She has a secret sister named Vodka.
Oh my gosh. Or there'll be like a line where they're like, "Where's Jin at?" They'll be like, "Oh, she's on the rocks."
Ooh.
That's right. Jin on the rocks. Boom.
This is a good time to end this, Ian.
Sorry. I went a very long time without making a dumb dad joke pun, so good job me for making it an hour and a half. So.
No, you got to put it in there somewhere. I mean, you always got to end on
Hopefully, anyone who might possibly go back and watch this will not be interested enough to stick around the whole hour and a half, and they won't hear that, so we'll be good. It dies here.
It's okay.
Well, awesome. Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I think we all enjoyed it for the most part, so that's really good. I don't know who else is planning on it, but I am going to be reading Wall of Storms next month. Pete's going to be reading it. If y'all want to join, you're more than welcome to. Any of you in the comments who want to join as well, we're going to start that. I'm down, Pete, if you want to get on and discuss. And Kyle, if you want to join us, if you're able to. I know, Andrew, you'll have baby by then, so can't join us for that probably. But if you can, that's cool too. Whatever y'all want to do. But I'm excited to read it. And yeah, thank you guys so much for doing this with me, though. This is a dream come true. I've always wanted to do this. So
yeah, live shows are probably my favorite part of BookTube. So
Yeah,
Very fun.
it's awesome, and it's cool to talk to you guys. You know, like we comment back and forth, but like I don't know, this is different. I've never had a conversation like this with other booktubers, so I loved it.
It's addicting.
I know. I was literally thinking to myself, I was like, what other read-alongs can I join?
That's a slippery slope. Ian.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Slippery
that's what you
slope.
told me, Nico. You're like, I guess I'm reading. I was honestly a little surprised that you ended up being able to read it with us because I know you had said you weren't sure if it was going to work out or not. So I did it.
I powered through. I think it is.
When did you finish it?
I ended up finishing it Saturday night, only because I ended up having a 4-hour round trip I had to make unexpectedly, which gave me a lot of audiobook time. So like I would have been ready for Saturday had the show been there like I thought. But I think powering through so much of it so quickly, kind of, even though I liked it a lot, I kind of feel like it still kind of sent me into a slump. And so I have been like dragging through Red Sister, which is what I'm reading now, which is fine. But I'm just like, every time I look at my eyes, just like, I can't read.
I DNF'd Red Sister. I'll probably have to give it another go. But
it's another buddy read.
It is?
It's just for me and one.
Oh, okay. Cool. I was like, maybe I was go, but
no, yeah, I was gonna say I also read Prey, which everybody else who was supposed to buddy read, I don't think any of them did. So I just read Prey for the heck of it. But
nice. Well, yeah, thank you. Oh, and thank you, Lana, for that comment. That was very sweet. I had a blast doing this with you guys, though, and anyone who wants to do a live show next month for Wall of Storms is welcome. We'll discuss on Discord, though. So anything else? Any parting words of wisdom? No. Awesome. That's fine. That's good. No, all right. Yeah, my pen will be the ending note. So
I can make a worse joke if
you don't have to. I don't think it's up there.
Put the sausage back in the control. What?
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, guys, so much. And yeah, see y'all on Discord.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
End broadcast.